running and VS Code open, and we'll start ASAP. We have about 3 pages to write today. 3 pages as in 3 JSX files to create, and we are going to, so basically what you're going to do today is that you guys can create notes and you post it to Firestore, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to write a script that will receive the entire collection of notes that you've written from your Firestore database, and we're going to dynamically generate cards and display it to the user. So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to show, in case there are no notes yet, we're going to say no notes yet. In case there are notes and it's loading, we're going to show loader. In case the notes have finished loading, we're going to show notes as different cards at the bottom, just the way Google Keep would do it. And I'm going to make a couple of UI changes, a couple of UI tweaks to my thing. You're welcome to join in and do it if you want to, but I don't have time to make any UI changes. I'm just doing a random design off the top of my head, so if you want to, you can just make the same changes as I make. So that'll be it. And secondly, what we're going to do is tomorrow I'm going to teach you guys how to add animations and stuff like that to your application. We're just going to tweak it a little bit more, and once that is done, I'll show you how to host it on a free React hosting platform. And once that is done, the next 3 days, right, tomorrow's the 27th, so that'll be your last class with me. 28, 29 and 30, you guys have 3 days off, and I want you to take the next 3 days off and work on this React application. Your project or your assignment for this, to finish this course successfully, is that all of you can either do it individually or you can do it as pairs of 2 people each, okay? Not more than 2 people each. And you guys will have to work on a feature and integrate it into this application. It can be literally any feature you want to. You pick what you want to add and you work on it over the next 3 days. It can be anything simple, complex, however you want to do it, you can do it. But it should be a new feature that you work on by yourself and integrate it into this application. You don't have to write a custom backend because we are using Firestore and Firebase. You can basically use any Firebase service for, that's another clue I'm giving you. You can use any Firebase service to build your own feature, or literally any other service. It doesn't have to be just Firebase. If you want to integrate with any other third-party outside application, you can do so, but you have to write code by yourself. You have to create, you have to write code from scratch. You can't just copy paste stuff and you know what I'm saying. So yeah, that's basically your assignment. Any new feature built by you guys entirely, integrate it into this application. Once you do that, you will submit both your hosting URL, because I'm going to show you how to host it, as well as I'm going to teach you how to integrate it with GitHub. So you will give me a GitHub repo URL as well. So I'm going to review both of them, and only if they both work out correctly, you will be considered for certificate. So that's basically what the evaluation criteria for this workshop is going to be. I've taught you every major concept. I'm going to teach you one more major concept today, and tomorrow will be a couple of UI tweaks. So with that, you guys should be able to write a new feature by yourselves on your own. So that's the plan. So you can't back out at this point. If you want to, you can, and but you won't complete the course. That's just the way it is. We informed this on the first day itself, so it's not a difficult thing. I'm not asking you guys to make a new one from scratch. I'm just saying improve and iterate on what you already have and submit something, right? So 24 people ready. What's the count on the stream? 31 people. What about the rest? React, if you have opened VS Code and you're ready to code. Alright, I'm going to go back to my code, and first thing we're going to do is, let's see. Okay, I'm going to go into my create node page over here, my create node component, and I'm going to make a couple of UI changes. So if you guys notice, if you look at my output screen over here, where's that? I have this type of input called the filled input, right? I'm going to change this to what's known as the outlined input. I'm just making a small design change. I'm going to change this to the outlined input, and I'm also going to change the width of this element. So to do that, what I'm going to do is go back to my code, and let's see, at the bottom you have variant filled. I'm going to change this to outlined. And on top I have a container with different columns, right? I'm going to remove the column classes, so it's just going to say container and margin top 4. So once I make those two changes, my output should have automatically changed to something that looks like this. It's wider and it has a different type of input. That's one change I'm gonna make. And the other change I'm gonna make is that at the bottom there's a class name called shadow sm. I'm gonna delete that, so I don't want any shadow on it from Bootstrap. So that way what happens is the input looks sort of cleaner for me. So that's the UI change that I've made. You guys can make it if you want to, or you can just skip this part. It's not compulsory. So that's one change. What else? Yeah, that's about it for me. You guys can, if you want to, you can skip it. So I'm not going to how do I put it? I'm not going to show you what exactly the changes were. Next thing I want you to do is I want you to create a new file called getnodes.jsx inside this folder. Inside the same folder as create node, I want you to create another JSX file called getnodes.jsx. Okay, all of you do that, and once you've done that, react to my message. Getnodes.jsx inside your home directory again. So this is going to be a component that is further going to be subdivided into two more components. The purpose of this JSX file is to trigger a Firestore GET request, and we're going to get back a list of elements. And while this happens, this is also going to include a loader component as well as the actual JSX file that will do the dynamic rendering of elements. So we're going to include both, and how we're going to do this is we're going to include both of them and pass props to them, and based on which prop should be rendered, the component will automatically render either a loader or the actual cards itself. So we'll do that. 19 people. Make it faster, guys, because there was this complaint on the feedback last time saying we get faster as the course, as the session is getting over. So I want to maintain the same speed throughout now. So just try to code really fast this time. $32 people. Okay, 37 reactions have to come in. Okay, 35 reactions. Okay, first thing I want you to do is import React. And we're going to import two more named exports. One would be use state. Oops, sorry. And the other one would be use effect. I think I've told you what use effect does. If I haven't, then I'll explain it again. So we're going to import those from React. And once that is done, I want to import Firebase as well. And we're going to import the Firebase configuration file. So // Firebase. So that's going to import the Firebase thingy as well. And at the bottom, let's export a default function. So let's say export default function get nodes, and inside which I am going to do a return statement. And inside this we're going to return a div, which is basically a container, and it has a spacing of 5 units from the top, and inside which I'm going to return a component. So all if you do it up until here, write code up until here, and then we'll look at what the next step is. React to my message once you finish writing code up until here. 5 people. Make it quicker, guys. Guys, it's 6 lines of code. Make it quick. 26. Who else is remaining? 28, 29. Okay, right. Next thing I'm going to do is we are going to create a hook on top. Let's call this the use effect. I mean, it is a use effect hook. So just type use effect and hit enter. Wait, the other option, the second one. So once you do that, you're going to get a sort of template for use effect. So what I want you to do is I want you to just delete all the code inside of it. So you have like an empty use effect hook that you can work with. So just do that. And once you do that, we are going to paste a Firebase, what do you call that? Asynchronous function inside this. This is directly from the documentation. So I'm not going to explain what exactly it does, but I'm just going to copy paste from the Firebase docs. And it does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. I'm going to paste the same thing in the chat. Once you've finished writing that use effect function and pasted the Firebase code inside it, react to that message, okay? Just do use effect. Do either the second or the third option from Emmet and then hit enter. It should autocomplete. Once it autocompletes, you should paste the Firebase code inside it by deleting whatever is inside it. Eight people. $16, $17. Come on, make it faster. 21. All right, 22. Alright, next thing I want you to do is inside of our Firebase function, we are going to add some more code, but before we do that, let's define a state on top. I'm going to have to write whatever we get from this Firestore function into our state, so we can then use that state to render it inside a component, right? So go on top above the use effect, and let's create a state container over here. So let's just say const state and use state, and let's do a use state function here, and inside which we're going to pass two different variables. One would be is loaded, and I'm going to say false, and the other one would be notes, and I'm going to say null. So what this basically does is we are setting the state of two different variables, is loaded and notes. Is loaded is going to be false because when it first loads, when the application first loads, the loading status would be null or false, which basically means our application is still loading. And notes would basically be an array that contains a list of all the notes that we have written so far, and that's going to be null in the beginning. So once we get a reply from Firestore and we get a list of notes, we're going to store that to the notes variable. So when you start off, it'll be null, and then you put a whole array inside it. So just define those two states inside, and once you do that, outside this, what I want you to do is create a variable. Let's call this const notes, and define it as an empty array. So I'll tell you why we're doing this, but first finish writing the code for that. Once you've done that, react to my message. Okay, faster. $24. 25. Once it hits 30, I'm gonna switch to my whiteboard, and I'm gonna have to explain a little concept to you guys on rendering multiple elements. So I'll make it quick. $29. Okay. $30. Okay, let's switch to our whiteboard. Alright, so I said you guys can render multiple components using certain state data, right? So what React does is, here's what's gonna happen. Let's see. Switch to fatter one. Okay. Alright, so now what React does is, let's say we have some sort of API call on top, okay? And some backend service is going to send us back some data. What we're going to do is we're going to write this data to a state variable, and we're going to write a React component. This React component can take whatever data is written to the state, and it can generate multiple components. In our case, we are going to get back a list of different nodes, right? A list of different nodes, and what we're going to do is we're going to take each node from this list, and we're going to generate cards on our front end. Different cards. So if you look at the structure of the HTML here, all these cards are exactly identical, right? The only difference between them is what data you put inside the cards or what state each card contains, right? Because the HTML structure for creating a card is exactly the same. You'd use a card element from material UI, card/card, and everything else is the same, same class names, everything is the same across all 5 cards. The only difference is what data you write inside the cards, which comes from the API. So what React basically does is, they say, in order to make multiple, dynamically generate multiple components, you need at least one thing. The one thing that you would need compulsorily is what's known as an ID, okay? Sorry, it's known as a key. I'll tell you why I said ID later on. But what you would need is what's known as a key. So what happens is when React generates multiple components, React needs a way by which it can identify each component or each element uniquely. So in order to uniquely identify it, you need to pass a unique variable called the key. Now in our case, what I did was, this key has to be generated by you, okay? What I did was, if you guys remember from the second day, remember I told you Firestore stores documents with 28 character names, right? And I told you these names would be unique throughout the entire collection. So you could have millions or even billions of documents, and each document would be super unique. There's no way 2 of them can have the same name, right? So what I basically ended up doing was, I took from the Firebase response, I took the document name or the document ID as well, and I wrote it to this key variable. So what happens is, when we get back a list of JSON objects over here inside this array, we're going to have key document IDs that are unique across all of them. So we're going to use this as the key for each variable. So this would have a different key, this would have a different key, this would have a different key. So every time an element is rendered, we would identify it using its key. That's one thing. The second thing that comes back in this response is the date on which the node was created. Now this, we're not going to write a function for this yet. This is a bit tricky, we'll look into this later on. So that's the date on which this node was created. And finally what happens is the node itself. So you'll have written some node, right? That data would come back with a key called the node key. So what we're going to do is, we're going to generate multiple elements using the document ID as a key. And we're also going to take the node that we actually wrote, and we're going to render it inside the body of each card. So that's basically what we're going to do with this whole, the next 2 components that we're going to write, okay? I hope that made sense. Now the thing is, if you guys look at the structure of the JSON data that has to come back from the API, in order to generate multiple elements, it has to be of a specific standard. Only then React can iterate through them. So if you look at the standard, it'll be basically an array, a huge array, and this array would contain what's known as a JSON object or a JavaScript object. So if you look at the way these objects are created, is that they start with a curly brace and they end with a curly brace, and you can have multiple of that sort inside the array. You get the idea, right? And you can have this is not a semicolon, by the way, it's just a comma, and you have multiple rows, and then they finally finish off at the end of the array. So now if you look inside this, they're gonna have key value pairs. For example, I can say note, and I can have some note inside it, and I can have a second key, say date, and I can have some date inside it. So each object can contain the same key value pairs with different values inside them. I don't know if that made sense, but what we're basically going to do is, we're going to go through this entire array, and for each object that exists in this array, we're going to generate a specific element, okay? That's basically the entire process of dynamically generating elements. So if you go back to our code, we're going to write code to create each object, okay? Each object, we're going to write code to create them right now. So go back to your code, and let's see. Okay, inside this part, right, where you say doc and you have an arrow function, hit enter and make a new line there. All of you just do that really quick. Make a new line inside the query snapshot.forEach. You have this little function here, right? This forEach thingy. Inside that, just make a new line. We're gonna write an object over here. So say const doc data is equal to, and inside this is the structure of our object, inside which we're going to define key value pairs now. First thing I told you is that I want something called the document ID, right? So if you look at the document ID, where we can get this from is that you see this little keyword here that says doc. So what happens is your query snapshot would contain a list of different documents, and each document will have a huge amount of data associated with it. So when you say for each of doc, you're basically taking each element inside this query snapshot as a separate doc, okay? And then you can target elements, or you can target data that is inside each doc using the doc keyword. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ID, and I'm going to say doc.id. So what this does is it takes the current document and it takes its ID, and then it writes it to a variable called ID. So now we have a key value pair that says ID and the document ID. And this key value pair is written to a JSON object called document data or doc data. Okay, I don't know if that made sense to you, but if you have a doubt, then please ask me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna write the next thing. Okay. The next thing we're gonna do is take the created date, the date and the timestamp when the document was created. So that's gonna come from doc.data. .data. This data thingy is another function that is inbuilt, that comes built in with Firestore. So that's just gonna take the data that is inside the doc, and inside which we have a multiple JSON key value pairs, and I'm going to target the date that which we created it on. So specifically created. So that's basically going to take the date created field from inside the document, and it's going to assign it to the created variable here. So I'm taking the date on which we created the node, and then finally the node itself. So I'm going to say note, and I'm going to say doc.data, and I'm going to say .node. So that's like all of our data written to a JavaScript object called docData. So once you do that, please let me know in the chat. All we've done so far is that we have taken a single document and we've created an object and extracted the data from the document, only the data that we need, and we've written it to key value pairs and created a little JSON object, okay, or a JavaScript object. Now we're going to take this JavaScript object and we're going to push it into an array. So as we keep, for each iteration, we take each document and take data and we push it to the array, right? So at the end of the total number of iterations, we're going to have one single array with multiple JavaScript objects, and each object would basically form a single note or a single card. I hope that made sense. 14 of you. Okay. Go on, just get this done really quick, guys. The ID created a note on the right side from the JSON response. Yeah, they're from the JSON response. Query snapshot will basically take a JSON response from Firestore, and we can take that and then we can assign it to our own variables on the left side. Okay, 31. Alright, I'm gonna move on now. Next, what we're gonna do is we are going to go into this straight inside the for each thing itself. What we have to do at the end is that once you create the object, we're gonna have to push this object into the array, right? And if you look on top on line 10, we have an empty array over here. So we're gonna start pushing these objects into that array. So I'm gonna say notes, the name of the array, dot push. Push is basically a JavaScript built-in method that takes some data and pushes it into an array. So I can do that and just say doc data. So it's basically going to take this object doc data and it's going to push it inside the nodes array. So once we have done that, at the bottom, outside the loop, okay, outside the loop, remember the loop starts from here. Dot for each, the loop starts here, and this is where it ends on line 24. So outside the loop, once you've pushed it, pushed all the different objects into the array, we're going to take that array and we're going to write it to the state variable that we created on top. So this is basically a normal JavaScript variable in memory. This on top, right, the nodes over here, this is your state variable. So what we're basically doing is you're first populating this nodes variable, this nodes array here, and once we finish populating them, we're simply copying this over to the actual state variable directly. Okay, so at the bottom over here on line 25, I'm going to write set state. Be careful of the autocomplete. Sometimes it'll complete and it'll show you stuff that you didn't mean to write. I want to say set state, and we're going to say is loaded, and we're going to set this to true. So loading has been done, so we're saying is loaded true, which means loading is finished and we're ready to display data. And I'm going to say nodes, and I'm going to write the nodes array to the nodes state variable. Okay, once that is done, we're going to have to bind set state to the bottom of the use effect. Okay, so once that is done, let me know. Oh guys, I made a little mistake on top. I don't know if you guys noticed, but look on line 6. I have written use state here by mistake. It should have been set state. Just make that little change. On top on line 6, I wrote use state and use state by mistake. Just change that to state and set state instead. Use state is the name of the function. Set state is the variable that we are using to set the state. Okay, just change that to set state instead. I made a little mistake. Well, if you're done, once you've done that, just react to my message. Next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to import two different components. Okay, scroll all the way to the top, right below your Firebase import. I want you to import two different functions. Okay, first thing we're going to import is what's known as the nodes. So when you say nodes, this is basically the component that dynamically generates different nodes. Okay, so I'm going to import nodes from /nodes. It doesn't exist, we're going to create it in a minute. And the second thing I want you to import is the nodes loader. So we're going to have a little loader component that would be displayed instead of the nodes until the nodes load. So that's also going to be imported from /nodes loader. Okay, too many typos. Right, so do those two imports on top, and once that is done, I'm just going to copy paste it at the bottom. Once that is done, react to my message. It's simple, right? Just do that, and then come to your return statement, and inside the return statement we're going to add a little component here. We're going to render a little component here. People have done importing. Make it faster, please. Okay, good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to render the loader component. If you notice on top, I would have, okay, wait, where did this go? Oh yeah, sorry, there's one more line that we'll have to write on top. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a component here, okay? I'm going to say const loader is equal to nodes loader, and we're going to pass a parameter in, which is basically nodes. So what we receive, right, the component that you just received, we are passing it into this as a prop, nodes loader, okay? So nodes loader would basically take the nodes component itself inside it as a prop, and we're going to assign this whole thing to what's known as a loader. This loader is going to now be a component, and once this line is done, just react to that message once you've gotten this done. Just put that one line in. Only then we can render that component at the bottom. Twenty-four, 25. Okay, make it faster. So once you define your loader, at the bottom what we can do is we can inside a div, I can say loader, and this is going to be a self-closing tag, and we're going to pass two different props here, okay? First I'm going to say is loaded, and I'm going to pass the state variable state.isLoaded, and the second prop would be the actual nodes itself. I'm going to say state.nodes. So once I've passed both in, that's basically the entire get nodes function. There's nothing more that we'll have to write, okay? Just do that for me really quick and then react to my message. So basically what we're doing is we have a component called loader, and this loader component is going to take in two different props, okay? It's going to take the state of loading, and it's also going to take in the state of our nodes, okay? So if nodes has some data written into it, it's going to take that from the state. If is loaded has some data that is changed, right? If it changes from false to true, it's going to take that also in. And as this data changes, the loader component that on line 34 here will decide what should be rendered from inside it. So if you look at what's inside the loader component, it'll basically be, where's that? The nodes loader thingy over here, okay? It's either this or this, one of these two, okay? So we're gonna write two different JSX files for that to handle that case, okay? 15, how many more? One more thing I need you guys to do is we're gonna have to write a few custom CSS classes, but this, I don't want to waste time on the CSS part of it. So what I did was I already wrote the CSS classes. I'll just copy paste it for you guys over here, and you guys will copy paste that into your what do you call it, app.css, okay? So let's just do that really quick. Okay, give me 1 sec. This is like custom code that I wrote for like a different project long ago, but we're gonna reuse it over here. So I'm gonna go into app.css, and let's go all the way to the bottom. Gotta paste that in, okay? I'm gonna paste the same thing into the chat. Copy the CSS I just sent and paste it into your app.css at the bottom at the end of the file. Just paste that in and then react to that message that I just posted in case you finished copy pasting the whole thing. App.css file at the bottom, at the end of the file, go to a new line and just paste that CSS that I gave you right now. Once that is done, just close that file. That's all we need to do. Save it and close it. 4. Okay, how many more? if you guys have noticed on Google Keep, right, you have notes that are of different heights. So by default, what happens is if you use material design to create cards, all the cards are gonna have the same height. So let's say you have one card that has a huge amount of words inside it, and another card that has, say, 3 or 4 words. The card with 3 or 4 words will automatically increase its height to match the card that is next to it, which looks ugly. So if we use this custom CSS style that I just wrote, it's going to make sure that each card can have its own height, and based on the height of each card, the cards would automatically rearrange themselves and kind of look neat. It's what's known as a masonry grid. That's another design concept which we will not get into right now, but that's just the term used to refer to it, masonry grid. Just copy paste the CSS, 10 of you remaining, 12 of you remaining. Come on guys, make it faster. Just open app.css and paste the code in at the bottom, save it, close it. That's it I want you to do. Once that is done, we can close the getNotes.jsx file, and we're going to create a new one. First, let's create the notes loader itself. So again, inside the home folder, we're going to create notes loader. Oops, KSX. Notes loader.jsx, upper camel case. Once you do that, react to my message. Notes loader.jsx, react to my last message once you created the file called notes loader.jsx. Okay, good. Now what you're gonna do is I'm gonna say we're gonna import React first. And after we import React, remember the whole linear progress bar that we used on our page loading? That's the exact same thing that we're going to import here. Okay. Once that is done, we are going to export a default function. Finish this first, and then I'll do the rest of the code. Have you all finished up until here? React to my latest message if you finished all the way up until here. Okay, good. Now what we're gonna do is it's something a little different. Okay, we're gonna export another component, or we're gonna return. So what you're gonna do is we're gonna have two return statements. Okay, first return statement is going to return another sub component with props inside it, and the component that we write inside the sub component is then gonna make use of these props and then further return a specific piece of UI. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna type return and return function, and I'm going to say loading component, and we're going to pass two different props inside this. One would be is loaded, and the other would be props. Okay, that's the syntax for like passing props into another subcomponent, dot props, and do an opening and a closing brace. And inside this, we're going to do some more conditional rendering. All of you do this, and once you've done this, just react to my message. We're rendering another component inside the main component that you're exporting, and inside the other component, the second component that you're exporting, the inner one, we're going to do a little more conditional rendering. So the conditional rendering that takes place will take place based on the props that we pass here, and once that rendering takes place, it'll get passed back up to nodes loader itself, and it'll get exported as the nodes loader component. So just do that. Okay, 15. $23. Make it faster, guys. 24. Okay, now what you're gonna do is functional rendering. Okay, conditional rendering. First thing I'm gonna say is if some condition, else some condition, and on top we're gonna have one return statement, and this is gonna return something. Else, if that condition is not true, we're gonna return something different. Okay. So first, on top, what you're gonna do is you're gonna check if the component, if the async function, the Firestore async function, has finished loading. So you're gonna say is loaded. If this is true, right, it means the Firestore thingy has loaded and we have some output to show. In which case, we will render a component. Now, what component do we render inside here? We're supposed to receive it as a prop on top from the main component. Okay, so I'm gonna say component on top. So when I call the nodes loader function from outside, right, from the get nodes.js file, where's that? This one. If you look on top, I'm calling nodes loader, right? I'm calling nodes loader, and from nodes loader, I'm passing the nodes into it, right? So that's basically what you're receiving over here as a component, and I'm going to return it as a component. So we finished loading, and once you finish loading, we need to return the nodes themselves directly. So I'm going to say component, and we're gonna have to pass props inside it. Now we don't know what these props are. It's gonna be passed on from the file from nodes.jsx. So as long as you don't know what the props are, you can simply do dot props, and it'll take any props that is sent to it and it'll just send it back. It's more like a pipeline that does the job of just transferring data from one part to the other part. It doesn't care about what the props are. It doesn't care about the format of the props or how many props are there. It simply takes whatever is given to it and passes it out back on. That's it. So when you're doing, when you're passing props of an unknown number, you can simply just do dot props. It'll directly just push it in. Okay. So we're returning the component that we received with whatever props has been passed to the component. You don't care about what the props are. At the bottom, what we do is, in case the loader has not, it hasn't finished loading. In that case, you're gonna have to show a loader, right? Because it's still loading. So what we'll do is we'll do div dot container dot deflex. Again, bootstrap classes. If you guys don't know what this is, go back and watch our bootstrap workshop. Content center and margin top 5. Okay, so I have a little container class here. It's going to center align its children. It's also going to have a spacing of 5 units from the top, and I'm also going to say style over here, and I'm going to define some custom CSS style, and I'm going to say width, and I'm going to say 100%. Okay, once this is done, I'm going to take my linear progress and my lead in progress is going to have a class of W100, which basically makes it 100% width, and you can simply close the linear progress inside here. Save the file, and we're done. All of you finish typing this in and respond to my message. That's basically the entire component, loading component itself. All it does is it takes in a component, which is basically the notes, and it also takes two different state variables, is loaded and any other props passed to it, and it checks if loaded is true or not. In case it has loaded, it will simply render the component that it received on top along with some props that came with it. In case it hasn't loaded, it will show you a loader. It will return a loader. That's it. That's all the code does. So once you've finished all of this, just react to my message saying done. And we're actually making good progress today. So once this is done, we have just one more file, the file that actually generates the notes, which is a simple, very simple file. That's again like what, 26 lines. That's it. Once you put that in, you should get like a pretty decent output. And once that is done, I'm going to show you how you guys can host your thingy on GitHub. I'll teach you version control on GitHub, and if you have time, I'll show you how to host it on GitHub. And all of you are going to host your apps today. Once that is done, tomorrow we can come back, make some aesthetic tweaks, show you how to make animations, stuff like that. We'll do some touch-ups like adding a 404 page, that kind of stuff. And I might show you how to use an additional library. I'm not going to tell you what it is. We'll come back and we'll look at it tomorrow if we have time. But this is like a really good library that I came across. I use it on most of my projects now. I think it'll be really useful if you guys can learn that library. So we'll see if you have time tomorrow. But that's the plan for now. So one more file and we should be good to go. 10 people. The others, please make it quick. You have 3 days for your project. We have today and tomorrow. But we're gonna finish this app as much as we can. And then 3 more days. 19. $23. Come on guys, make it quicker. 10 people have to finish. 9. I want you to code along with me. Don't just sit there and assume that I would send the entire file to you later on, because I've been doing that so far, but I'm not going to do it anymore. So if you guys don't code along with me and have all your code written, you'll have to do it by yourself, because I know some of you might not even code. You just be sitting there waiting for me to copy paste everything so you could just copy paste. You won't learn anything that way. I'm making you type at least so you would learn the syntax and you would be attentive. 31. Okay, 35 reactions for that. Okay, good. Once you do that, you can close this. You can close this as well, and go back to our notes. Our home folder, and we're gonna create notes.jsx, and we're gonna put the actual notes themselves in here. First thing I want to do is import React from React, and once this is done, we're gonna import something called card from material UI core / card. Okay, then export default function notes, and notes would take props. That's it. Once you do that, just tell me if you have completed up until this point. After this, we're gonna do some more conditional rendering. Okay. Respond to my message, react to my message once you've completed the basic template for the notes file. 21. Make it faster, guys. Okay, conditional rendering now. First thing I want you to do is take the nodes that you receive as props, and I want you to write it to an actual variable called nodes. And let's say props. Once that is done, we are going to check if Firestore has actually returned any nodes for us. Okay, now in case you guys have just created your app, even just created your account, you may not have created any nodes yet, right? In that case, we can't simply show a blank screen. Instead, we're gonna have to say something like you haven't created any nodes yet, or no nodes exist, or something of that sort, right? So I'm simply gonna check if nodes actually has any data inside it, if there are any nodes being returned in the first place. Okay, so first thing we can do is check if nodes, the variable, has been set, if it has some data inside it. Or what you can do is you can also check if nodes.length is 0. So in case nodes.length triple equals 0, triple equal to is strict equality checking, double equal to is lenient equality checking in JavaScript. So what's the difference between double equal to and triple equal to? Does anybody know? Both do the same thing in this case, but what's the difference? Can anybody explain? Let me see. Abhishek, can you tell us what the difference is?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know, maybe it will triple check it or not.
Okay, so no, basically okay, here's what happens. If you do double equal to, it's going to check if the left hand side and the right hand side hold the same value. Whereas if you do triple equal to, it'll check if the left hand side and the right hand side have the same value, plus it'll also check if the left hand side and the right hand side are of the same data type as well. So that's the difference between double equal to and triple equal to in JavaScript. So that's another ES5 plus thing. Just make a note of that. You can run into issues when you're doing this in other cases as well. Okay, so in case the nodes are empty, I want you to return a paragraph, and this paragraph, let's just say class name, and say margin top 5 units, and let's say you haven't created any nodes yet. Okay, and in case the nodes have been, there are some nodes that are being returned, we are going to return a different set of, we're going to return some other code. I want to put an empty element in here, and we're going to render the actual node or the card in here. Okay, so do it really quick, guys. Abhishek, can you mute yourself? You guys done up until here? React to my message if you've written all this code. Okay, good. Next thing I want you to do is we are going to render a h4 element. Let's just call this a container and say your nodes. Okay, so this is going to be a heading, and below this heading we have another div, which is basically a container, and it has a spacing of 4 units from the top. And I want to create another div, and I want you to give this, remember we copy pasted a huge amount of CSS previously? That CSS is going to be used for this element. Okay, so card columns. Okay, this is automatically going to create what's known as a masonry grid. MASONRY, masonry grid. Okay, different elements with different heights being automatically arranged based on what the best way they fit together would be. So that's what a masonry grid is. So once you do all of that, here's where we're going to do the actual dynamic, rendering. So what we're going to have to do is write some JavaScript code in here, and in order to do that, you would put that code within braces. So I'm going to say notes. Notes is basically the array that we have on top, right? So I'm going to say notes.map. Map is a function in JavaScript. If you don't know what that does, I'll explain. And let's do an arrow function really quick. And the pair of braces. And let's do a return statement inside it. Finish typing this and then I'll explain what it does, okay? So I'm going to say notes.map, and I'm going to create dynamically create a variable called note over here. So what it basically does is, notes is an array, right? So it's going to use a variable called note, and it's going to create a mapping for each element or each item inside the notes array. It's going to create a little, a little card here, and it's going to map it to a particular ID, okay, that we're going to assign to it. So in order to do the map function, you need to make sure that each element inside your array is targeted by a unique ID. In case it doesn't have a unique identifier and all your elements are the same, the map thingy won't work. So we have a unique ID, which is basically a document ID already. So we can go into our return statement and we can generate the card, and we're gonna have to pass in the ID here as a key. So I'm gonna say note.id, and let's give this a class name of card and p3. So it's going to have a padding of 3 units inside the card itself. And inside the card, we're going to have a h6 tag with a class name of margin 0, because h6 has a bottom margin in Bootstrap automatically. I don't want that. It should look a little more neater, so I'm taking that off. And inside which I'm rendering the note that is inside the note object itself, okay? That's all the code you have to write. So you have dynamically generated cards on the front end already. This is like all of the code that you have to write, literally. Easy, right? So once you've done it, just respond to my message. React to my message, please. That's the entire file, guys. Nothing more. We're done coding, basically. It's only 6:10 and we're done coding by then. This is like the fastest we have coded so far. Good progress. React to my message once you finish all of this. In case your output is broken and it says failed to compile, stop the app and start it again. Control-C, Y, npm start again, because we added new files, right? For some of you, it might automatically detect the files and it'll show you the output, in which case you could play around with the output. But I'm going to show you the output firsthand once all of you have reacted to my message. Some people are stuck on the previous message. There's only 13 reactions. Whoa, are you guys stuck? Did you miss out on anything? You can ask me your doubts in case you're stuck. I'll help you guys fix all the previous stuff that you're stuck with, because we're actually finishing early today. $19 of you. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for another 5 minutes probably. Get it sorted really quick. Jacinton. Jacinton, are you here? Or Subiksha, can you hear me?
Yes, Anaya.
Okay, can you do one thing? I need an Excel sheet where you have a list of all of them who have the workshop in progress role, and put their names in. And if you guys are building a feature, I want you to add that on the column next to your name. So I want you to do it by, say, tonight or by tomorrow evening. I want you to put that in, and once they do that, we can see if any of them clash, and you'll have to rearrange. So whoever gets to list theirs first gets to keep it. There can't be any repetition, so you guys will have to come up with something new. Once that is done, we can we'll know what they're building exactly. So I'll tell you if that is okay or not to build.
Okay.
So if you can just get that done by tonight, they can update by tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
27 done. Okay, guys, close the file. Let's go and look at our output. Hopefully it shouldn't be broken. Browser. Alright, so create a new node. For this, what I'm going to do is, there's a website called loremipsum.io. This is basically to generate dummy text, okay? So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click on copy. I have dummy text now. I'm just going to paste it in. Create. Say successful. Going to create 2 paragraphs of this now. I'm going to put this in. I'm going to create half a paragraph. Paste. Let's say 1 more, and then delete half from here. Okay, and 1 line. Sorry. Perfect. So now if I reload the page, I should see a loader. Nope, nothing. Let's see. Okay, let's stop the app and start it again. Nope, we probably ran into some error on the way, I guess. Let's see. Something missing from our application. Give me a sec, let me check. Oh yeah, we forgot to do one important thing. Go back to the code. If you look at this file over here, right? Where is that? Home.jsx. We have the create node function. We haven't imported our get nodes component at all, which is why it doesn't show up on the page. So let's just do that. Import get nodes from /components/home/get nodes, and at the bottom let's do get nodes save. So that was basically our problem, right? So I'm gonna go back to my output screen. Where's that? Browser. And as you can see, I have different cards at the bottom, right? So refresh the page once more, you would see the loading effect and all of that. Did all of you get the output? Just do the import alone in the main home file. I forgot to do that. So once you do that, you should get an output that looks like this. So as you add more nodes, say I add another huge node, and I click on create, refresh, that's going to show up and it's going to rearrange itself automatically. I'm going to add a slightly shorter one. Let's see. Create, refresh. Yep. Just gonna type in random nodes. Okay, so it basically works, right? How many of you got the output? Can you respond to my message? Just react to my message in case you got the output and it looks just the way mine looks. Or are you guys stuck? Let me know if you guys are stuck, if any of you didn't get the output.
Daniel, can you just show me the home.jsx for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
On top, just import get nodes from components home get nodes and render it at the bottom right below create node. That's the only thing we missed. Do that and then you should get the output. Nobody got the output? Guys, react to the message if you got in the output. Okay, good. Who's this one person? Aaron Saji Alexander, okay. Anybody else? Are you guys stuck? Let me know if you have any questions. If you're stuck anywhere, just let me know. We'll fix it really quick. Rohan Jabaraj. Show me your notesloader.jsx file, the top of the file. Let me see a screenshot of it. The others, are you guys confused? Okay, Rohan Jabraj, on line 4, you see export default function notes loader, right? You should receive, what do you call it, component as a parameter on top. Inside, on line 4, you have a notes loader function, right? Just put the word component inside it. Gayatri failed to compile. Get notes of J6. Did you stop the app and start it again?
Yeah, I tried it.
Okay, let's see. Show me a notes loader file. Notes loader.jsx. Guys, if your errors have been solved, delete the message that you posted so I can keep a track of the how many people got the output as well as how many errors are remaining. Okay, good. Rohan Jabraj, you got it. Who else? Gayatri, show the input is not defined. Okay, Jennifer, send the code for your, which file is this? Getnotes.jsx. Gayatri. Okay, again, Gayatri, line 4, notes loader. Just make sure you have the word component inside it with a capital C. I'm going to show you the code for that. I think most of you made this little mistake here. Under get notes, you guys see this over here. Not this, sorry. Notes loader. Yep, notes loader line 4. Make sure you have the word component over here, okay? Which should be a function parameter over here. Just make sure you add the word component with a capital C. A lot of you forgot that, which is why it doesn't compile. Just make sure you add that word in here. All if you do that, I think it should resolve. Because you're trying to render a component that doesn't exist, that you haven't received, which is why it says failed to compile. So once you do that, it should resolve. Jennifer Leslie, get node state, use state. Jennifer Leslie, line 6, I told you to change the word. Can you see the words state, comma, use state? You should change it to state, comma, set state. There is a small change I asked you to make. Just make that little change.
Anna, can you show the notes.js file?
Yeah, I think many of you just... There's like so many errors in that file right now. Over here, what you do is you... Okay, where's that? Notes.js. Which part do you want me to scroll to?
This part. This part is enough.
Okay. Guys, did you get the output? Jennifer, what you got to do is change use state to set state, and on line 18 you have the word input, right? You'll have to change that. You actually missed a lot of code. How come you missed an entire section of code?
No, actually get the same error.
You got the same error, huh?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, wait, let me see.
Okay.
On top on line 1, remove the word component from the import statement.
That's
You done? Infant Benita. For base. Infant Benita, the spelling of Firebase is wrong. Dot slash dot dot slash. That's the syntax. All the exist duplicate app. Ironic, show me the top of your getnodes.jsx file. Will you scroll down? Okay. Refresh it, but it is getting reflected in Firestore. Show me a code. Get notes. Okay, failed to compile. Sai Shanjai. It should be getnotes.jsx, right? The file name is wrong. Ajay, I can't tell you if I don't see the code. I don't know which file now. You're showing me this. Let me see. Send all three files, screenshots of all three files. Also, Ironiction, why is your code different from mine? It says is loaded true user. It should be notes.
Okay. பார்க்குறேன்.
Yeah. I just sent all three. Jennifer, Leslie, did you write down the entire code? Gayatri, did you get the output?
No.
I mean, this is basically the end of today's class. We've already finished all the coding. What we can do is, how many of you got the output? 11 of you got the output. Let me pick some people. Okay, Raksha and Devidarshini. And
No.
both of you. Then I want Rohan Jabaraj and Sharon Sneha. Okay, Sharon Sneha, can you help one set in one booth with Rohan Jabaraj and Divya and Raksha and another booth? We'll split people.
Yes.
Since you all got the output. Okay, Rohan, can you move to another booth with Sharon? Okay, good. Guys,
Okay, show me
getnotes.jsx. Okay. Guys, split yourselves. Some of you, whoever didn't get the people who didn't get the output, you can go to the bottom to one of the two booths. Just split yourselves. I don't want all of you staying here, so we can resolve this faster. If you finish and everything works, then you can leave.